Sup you beautiful people. Hope you've had a fantastic day. Welcome back to another new episode of What If Naruto Was the Red X. If you guys enjoy this what if, comment down below and let me know. And go ahead and check out other what ifs in the channel after watching this video. Don't forget to subscribe and leave a like, and also share this video with your friends. So now let's start this video. Jump City. Trigun continued resting against Titan's tower, gathering his depleted strength, even as a tiny green bird made its way to him. Flying into Trigun's ear, Beat Boy flew as deep inside of it as he could before suddenly changing into a whale inside of his head. Trigun's eyes snapped open as he did, and he roared out in pain, thrashing about slightly while shaking his head from side to side. Gripping his head with both hands, the demon then walked forward into some lava and snarled in anger. As he did, however, Starfire and Cyborg flew towards Trigun from the distance. Upon approaching the massive demon, Starfire twisted where she was before finally tossing Cyborg straight for Trigun. The Titanium Teen growled as he unlocked his sonic cannon upon approaching the massive red demon. Roaring out, Cyborg then fired his cannon at Trigun, only to widen his eyes as a barrier protected him. The barrier then sent the sound waves flying back at Cyborg, knocking him back to where Starfire quickly caught him before he could fall to the lava below. I believe that we have obtained his attention. Starfire noticed while flying towards solid ground so she could release the metal teen. As she did, Beat Boy slipped out of Trigun's ear and changed shapes into a bird, flying over to solid land and returning to his normal form, completely covered in earwax. Just remind me not to do that again, dude's earwax is way beyond nasty. The Green Titan grumbled out while shaking as much of the earwax from his form as he could. Soon Starfire and Cyborg landed behind the Green Teen, and Trigun turned towards them with narrowed eyes. Inhaling briefly, Trigun then spewed forth a torrent of lava towards the three Titans. Ending his attack, a frown crossed Trigun's face when the smoke cleared, and he saw a glowing red shield around the three, and a familiar ring on Starfire's finger. However, before he could do anything else, Cher came at him from the side, slamming her mace into the side of Trigun's head. The demon cried out as the attack slammed into his skull, knocking him over to the side, and stumbling back while Cher flew around. Dr. Fate then threw his hands up as he flew next to Donna, casting a quick spell and attacking Trigun from the side, slamming his power into the demon's side. On the ground, those who were unable to fly merely hung back as the flying members of the team did their job. Stumbling to the side, Trigun swung a fist towards the annoying flies near him, only for Donna and Dr. Fate to quickly fly out of the way. Growling angrily, Trigun then roared out in pain as a burst of white fire from Donnie connected with his face, causing him to stumble back as black fire fired her eye beams into his chest. The red demon fell back into Titan's tower with a grunt, nearly crushing what was left of the building before opening his glowing red eyes. He then saw Etrigan and raised a brow as the demon breathed a torrent of flames towards him. Etrigan, it's been quite a while since I saw you last, still in the service of these pathetic mortals. I see how sad to see such a high-ranking demon fall so far. Trigun used before kicking Etrigan with one huffed foot, sending him flying back into Jump City where he smashed into a building. Narrowing his eyes as he did, Trigun then watched as the flying members of the group lunged at him from the sky. I've had enough of these games. The massive demon growled out before inhaling a deep breath, his chest puffing out before he breathed out a torrent of lava towards them. However, much like with the others, three rings of Azar protected them from Trigun's power, one Dr. Fate was carrying, one by Cher, and the last one by Blackfire. Narrowing his eyes, Trigun then saw Donnie heading his way and raised a brow before reaching up and grabbing her with one hand. What business do the spirits have in this world? Trigun wondered, and Donnie grit her teeth as the massive beast squeezed her in his massive hand, then grunted as Cher came at him once more. Begging false angel, you are not welcome in my world. Trigun growled out while lifting his massive arm and slamming it down on top of her, sending her flying towards the ground, but Starfire quickly caught her. As Starfire carried Cher, Trigun stared at Donnie as she struggled in his grasp, unable to break his grip or phase out of it. Damn it, will you just let me go? Donnie shouted, causing a loud screaming echo of green sound waves to shoot out at Trigun, slamming into his head and loosening his grip on her. Hovering for a moment, Donnie then muttered before flying out of the way as a pissed off Trigun reached for her. Great, now I have a sound wave type attack like that, Ember. The white-haired gosling girl grumbled while flying through the air, forming a pair of white fireballs into her hands, as she turned and fired two streams at Trigun, the red demon grunting as he held up one hand to block the flames. Trigun growled darkly as she did and then pushed her flames back at her, knocking her from the sky. Blackfire flew down and caught her, however, Donnie shaking her head while rubbing her temples. Oi, never again, I am never doing that ever again. The girl muttered under her breath as they came to the ground, Dr. Fate and Donna still flying towards the red demon above them. Muttering a chant, Dr. Fate fired a blast of magic at Trigun, the beam slamming into the demon's chest. Grunting, Trigun narrowed his eyes before throwing his arm forward, a murder of ravens flowing out of his hand and into Dr. Fate. The gold-helmeted man grunting as the birds knocked him off balance, Trigun reaching up and slamming the man down into the ground. As he did, Donna lunged up and slammed her hands into the side of Trigon's face, only for the demon to exhale through his nose, knocking Donna back where he backhanded the girl to the ground. Man, they got totally creamed. Kid Flash said while Nightwing narrowed his eyes as Trigon grunted for a moment before narrowing his eyes as he noticed the gold rings that several members of the group were wearing. You carry rings of Azar, no doubt they are relics from former minions. Trigon noted gruffly while the three titans stood unwavering against his glare. It matters not, fighting you is beneath me. Trigon then declared while narrowing his four crimson eyes and causing them to glow brightly. As they glowed, a massive S-shaped rune appeared beneath them, red lightning crawling up from it and into the heroes zooming the group. As it did, Batman clenched his fists and walked out of the seal, seemingly unaffected by it. Shayera did the same while activating her hammer at the same time, and Etrigan dragged Dr. Fate from the seal. Cool, seem you are well aware of the darkness in your hearts. A pity, I would have so loved to see you do battle with it. Trigon noted with a frown while Tartarus as a whole walked out of the seal, grunting as the lightning tried to hold on to them, Ravager also walking out. Ha! We don't just acknowledge it, buddy. We embrace our darkness. There's no way you can turn it against us. Jinx shouted at Trigon with a grin on her face, the massive demon raising a brow before smirking sinisterly as he looked at the two groups. I see, but can that be said for the rest of your friends as well? Trigon questioned, and the two groups turned to see the titans were unable to move, Starfire's hair rising, and a black and white version of herself with red eyes flew out of her body. A similar creature crawling out of Beast Boy's back, another punching its way through Cyborg's chest. Still more appeared as Kid Flash shook in place, a hand reaching out of his side before a doppelganger of him stepped out of his body. Donna grit her teeth as one pulled itself out of her back, and finally, Nightwing grit his teeth before crying out as a final one escaped from within him. Aw shit, just figures the damn titans would have a dark side he could use against them. The tiny Terra grumbled while the rest of Tartarus nodded their heads in agreement with him. Falling to their knees, the titans then looked to the side where dust had been kicked up into the air, only to slowly be blown away by the breeze, revealing the titan doppelgangers to them. Somehow I thought I was Tor. Beat Boy mumbled while staring at his doppelganger with white eyes, the other titans choosing not to comment. I may be the source of all darkness, but you are your own worst enemies. Trigon commented with a dark chuckle, as the Shadow Titans grinned towards the real titans. The Shadow Cyborg lunged forward first, nearly hovering before the real Cyborg with a smirk. Raven wasn't the only one with a bad side. The shadow creature noted darkly before slamming a fist into Cyborg's face, sending him flying back while the rest of the Shadow Titans lunged at their counterparts. Oh crap. We can't beat the normal Titans on a good day without temp. Now we've got to deal with a bunch of evil clones. Gizmo demanded while staring at the sight, and Blackfire frowned when she saw the clone of Starfire throwing starbolts at a real sister. Normally, I wouldn't care, but I'm trying to be a better sister, so I say we at least try to help them. Blackfire replied before launching herself into the air and ramming into her sister's doppelganger, sending it flying away. Besides, this way I get to beat up on Starfire and not feel bad about it. Blackfire added to herself while grinning as the false Starfire hovered in the air and grinned. Oh, I don't know, sister dear, perhaps I can show you a trick or two. The false Starfire stated with a grin, ramming into Blackfire before twisting around to knee her in the gut, then brought her hands up and slammed them into Blackfire's head, sending her flying into the ground. Oh man, something tells me this is really gonna hurt. Seymour mumbled before Jinx pinched the bridge of her nose and exhaled. Alright, listen up. Seymour, go and help Blackfire if you can. Billy and Kid Wicked, you two go after the fake Kid Flash. Gizmo, take on that Cyborg Wannabe. Mammoth and Dwayla, you two handle Bad Beast Boy. Donnie, you get to take on Evil Donna. Private, you and me are taking on Deathwing over there. Jinx suddenly ordered, a smirk crossing Ravager's lips as she heard the sound line up to take down the Shadow Titans. Good then, Tartarus, attack. Jinx ordered while pointing over to where the Titans were doing battle with their dark sides. As they ran off, Shayera looked to a frowning Batman and Dr. Fate. Should we help them? She questioned, and Batman shook his head. At this point it would only tire us out, which is probably what Trigon wants besides entertainment, that is. Batman replied while looking to the battling teens with a frown, and Dr. Fate nodded his head in agreement. We should take this moment to recuperate, they should be able to deal with the false Titans quickly enough. Dr. Fate replied through panting breaths as he tried to focus so he could regain his strength, Batman frowning as he turned to where Trigon was resting, his body growing slightly larger for a moment. Let's just hope they hurry, otherwise even if we do work together, Trigon will be too powerful for us to destroy. Shayera noted while looking to the massive red demon with a frown, the other members of the Justice League Unlimited agreeing with her. Meanwhile, the Kyuubi slept silently over to the side. However, a single eye soon opened and gazed at the spectacle in the distance. Ha yes, occupy him and his all-seeing eyes, but soon enough, his power will be mine, Kyuubi thought to himself, while closing his eye and slowly sleeping once more, gathering his strength for what would soon happen to him and Trigon. Depths of Hell. Naruto and Itachi approached a boat within the depths of hell, the blonde gaping as he saw it. How's a boat floating in lava? Naruto questioned, and Itachi smirked slightly as he hopped into it and gripped a pole next to it, his head snapping to it a moment later. Something interesting about that, Itachi? Naruto asked as he hopped into the boat as well, and the dark-haired man was silent for a moment. No, not really, though we may wish to keep it with us. Itachi replied smoothly while shoving off, pushing them downriver and then twirling the staff as he sat down, and they floated with the current of the lava. However, unseen by the blonder Itachi, was the four glowing red eyes following them from up above. The eyes belonged to a slender figure that stayed low to the ground and hidden in shadow. It narrowed its eyes as they went further down the river of lava known to most mortals as simply the river Styx. Moving further along and following after the two silently, unseen. So how much do you know about what's going on down here? Naruto asked as they continued to float downstream, and Itachi was silent for a moment before answering the blonde-haired teen. Not much really, all I know is what I was able to glean from your memories. Itachi replied simply and then sighed while standing up and twirling the staff he'd taken in hand for a moment. Also, look behind you. Itachi then stated, and Naruto turned, only to grumble as dozens of fire wraiths started to flow out of the lava and hover towards them ominously. Boy, even in hell I can't catch a break. Naruto muttered while pulling the kusanagi from his back and narrowed his eyes as the many fire wraiths approached. This should be simple enough for the two of us to deal with. Itachi mused while twirling the staff and then lunging forward, swinging it with one hand, and slicing a fire wraith in half as he landed on a rock. Not one to be outdone, Naruto lunged forward as well, swinging the kusanagi with a grin before smirking, as he then twisted in the air and swung his blade down on one of the fire wraiths. Looking to Itachi with a smirk, he then watched the man twist and twirl his staff over his head, taking out several of the fire wraiths before twisting on his heel, swinging the entire staff, and taking down more of the annoying fire wraiths. Twitching as he watched the man upstage him once more, Naruto reached back and pulled over of his ninjutsu before twirling both it and the kusanagi in hand. Lunging at the incoming fire wraiths with a grin, Naruto jumped up with a roar and swung both blades, landing against a rock once he had. Grinning slightly as several fire wraiths came at him, swinging their tendril-like arms at him, the blonde jumped up and ran along their length, before slicing the fire wraith into pieces, and landing against the side of the chasm walls. Quickly making his way up the side of the wall, Naruto looked back with a grin as several fire wraiths followed him up. Alright. The blonde cried while twisting the two swords in his hands. This party's getting crazy, let's rock. The blonde exclaimed as he fell towards the fire demons, slicing them into pieces and landing on the ground in a low crouch, the bottom of his trench coat rising up as he did. Rising a brow at the display, Itachi then twisted around, destroying several more fire wraiths that came at him, before lunging up the side of the chasm as well. Flipping off of the wall and over Naruto, Itachi grabbed his free ninjutsu and landed with a smirk. Impressive work, but please let me show you how it's really done, Naruto-kun. Itachi stated as several more fire wraiths came at him, and he crouched down before moving forward with lightning-fast speed, dicing the fire wraiths into pieces as he went. Sliding to a halt as dozens of the fire wraiths came at him, throwing their arms towards him like long flaming whips. Rolling his eyes, Itachi quickly threw off his cloak and jumped into the air, twirling the staff over his head, and bringing it down onto the ground, directly through several of the fire wraiths. Nodding his head to unknown beat, Itachi then moved with forward, twisting the ninjutsu in hand, and slicing fire wraith after fire wraith into pieces. Twisting around into a flip, Itachi slashed another fire wraith, and then rolled back to avoid another fire wraith, before twirling the staff and throwing it at the offending wraith, impaling it, and then twirling the ninjutsu he had left in hand. Lunging into a group of fire wraiths, Itachi then started to swing his blade all around, cutting his way through the dozens of wraiths, as if they were nothing. Sliding to a stop, Itachi watched as Naruto lunged past him with a wide grin on his face. My turn. The blonde exclaimed as he ran towards the fire wraiths as Itachi had, ducking below several balls of fire. Naruto then slashed upwards with his blades, then twisted into a swing. He then twisted into another swing at another wraith. Finishing off his combo by bringing up both of the swords, Naruto then slammed the two weapons into the ground, a burst of wind suddenly flowing forward and ripping through the many fire wraiths instantly. Turning to Itachi with a grin, Naruto leaned his blades into his shoulders, while Itachi shook his head. Now that is how you deal with them. Naruto offered arrogantly, and Itachi merely raised a brow before both turned as a mass of fire wraiths headed their way. You want these or should I take them? Naruto asked Itachi as the man pulled out the staff from the wall before looking to Naruto. Let's both deal with this minor annoyance, but first I must suggest a trade. Itachi then said while tossing the staff to Naruto, the blonde rolling his eyes as he tossed the ninjutsu in his hand to the dark-haired man. Catching the staff, Naruto raised a brow when he felt it, and Kusanagi suddenly pulsed, but ignored it and twirled both it in hand. Lunging forward, the 2x Konoha shinobi then lunged into the fray, Naruto swinging the staff first before digging its tip into the ground and swinging around on it, the Kusanagi outstretched and slicing through several of the wraiths. Meanwhile, Itachi jumped into the air and swung both blades into the wraiths in an X pattern. Coming to the ground and rolling forward, Itachi then moved back while swinging up with both blades, dragging the earth upwards into the wraiths. Landing in a crouch next to Naruto, the two stood as one against the remaining wraiths, before looking to one another. Nodding their heads, the two lunged forward together, Naruto and Itachi both forcing chakra to their blades before stopping and swinging them into the mass of different wraiths. As they did, 3 blades of pure chakra flowed from their weapons, flying forward and tearing their way through the mass of wraiths. Smirking at the sight, Naruto twirled the Kusanagi in hand for a moment before placing it onto his back, then tossed Itachi the staff. Smirking, Itachi tossed the 2 ninjutsu in the air while catching the staff in one hand, Naruto catching the ninjutsu in his hands, twirling them for a moment, and then sheathing them on his back as they stood victorious. HMPH, not bad for a dead guy. Naruto noted, and Itachi smirked while walking over to his cloak and pulling it over his form. I could say the same for you, Naruto-kun. Itachi reminded, and the blonde-haired teen merely rolled his eyes while shrugging his shoulders. So where to next? Naruto asked, only to turn as another fire wraith came at him from behind, only this one was smashed by a falling figure. What now? Naruto questioned while pulling the Kusanagi from his back, the figure standing up and revealing a slender figure with 4 glowing crimson eyes. Wait a minute, I know those eyes, the blonde whispered to himself while Itachi looked at him for a second before turning back to the figure. Blinking for a moment, Naruto narrowed his eyes as the figure sauntered towards him with a noticeable sway to his hips. Something the matter, Naruto-kun? Itachi questioned, and Naruto frowned while looking over to the side, where a large hood-shaped opening spilled lava down into the river below. I don't know, but I intend to find out if I'm right. The blonde whispered while turning with the Kusanagi, a blade of wind cutting out a trail for the lava to follow. Itachi narrowed his eyes when Naruto did, then watched as light came towards them and revealed the figure, Naruto's eyes widening as he laid eyes on her. She was quite clearly around Naruto's age with a full figure, though was also somewhat shorter than him with familiar blood-red skin and black markings, identical to those that Trigun had, sharp obsidian claws at the tips of her fingers, pointed ears framing her face, sharp fangs replacing her teeth, long raven black hair that reached her ass, 4 glowing red eyes, a small red gemstone at the center of her forehead, with black vines with thorns curving around her head in a similar way to Trigun's antlers, forming into a demonic tiara of some sort. She was dressed in a sleeveless leotard with high leg holes showing her hips, a pair of light leather armor stationed over her hands and forearms with familiar gemstone clasps over the backs of her fists, more of the armor wrapped around her waist, all identical to the armor Trigun wore, a pair of thigh-length black boots with horizontal slits on the sides of her thighs, and a familiar chain belt hanging loosely from her hips, only with a loincloth similar to Trigun's under it, only it was red in color. Kar-chan? Naruto questioned while staring at the girl in shock, however she merely raised a brow before smirking darkly. One part of her, actually the demonic part of her to be precise. The demonic raven replied, her tone a sweet almost seductive tone, yet it somehow managed to make Naruto shiver. Giggling at the slight fear on the blonde's face, she then sauntered over to him and leaned forward. But that doesn't mean I don't have a soft spot for you, Naruto. She purred out and Naruto gulped while looking into her glowing eyes. I'm not sure if that's a good thing, or a bad thing, though I am kind of curious about it. Naruto couldn't help but think to himself as Itachi rolled his eyes at the sight and wandered over to the side, so he wouldn't see anything he didn't want to. Hopefully she doesn't want to get frisky with him, but then again, this is the physical incarnation of the girl's demonic nature, and lust is technically a sin. Itachi mused to himself as he walked away, sitting down a distance from the two on the chance that Raven wanted to get frisky. Jump City. The Kyuubi no longer rested, instead it was watching as the Titans did battle with their doppelgangers with the assistance of Tartarus. The fight was actually more interesting than Kyuubi would have believed. While it was well known that he couldn't technically use his intellect outside of a host, what few knew was that he alone has some minor control over his form. This was something he kept to himself for obvious reasons. Trigun didn't know, and believed he'd be a mindless beast he could keep as a pet. Well, Kyuubi planned on showing him otherwise. As such, the kitsune was sitting back, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. Once those stupid doppelgangers had drawn attention somewhere, and Trigun couldn't focus on him, then he would strike. In the city, Beat Boy was running from his doppelganger, the false Beat Boy having turned into a hawk. Quickly turning into a Doberman as the doppelganger landed at his side, Beat Boy mentally grimaced as he changed into a wolf to counter him. However, as he got close to biting Beast Boy, Mammoth lunged out of a building and slammed his fists into the ground, breaking it apart and sending both Beast Boys flying into the air. The real Beat Boy quickly flew over to Mammoth and landed on his shoulder while changing back with a breath of relief. Dude, I never thought I'd be so happy to see you. Beat Boy said while looking towards the false Beat Boy, as it changed back to its true shape across from them. However, they all then heard Waila and winced visibly, as she brought her base down on top of the false Beat Boy from the top of a building. Whoa, don't you think that was overkill? Mammoth questioned as Waila walked over to them with the base sling over her shoulders. Yeah, I mean it was so totally worthy of Haruko, but did you have to smash me into the pavement, and for that matter, when did you get so strong? Beat Boy asked the girl, and Waila blinked before reaching into her coat sleeve and produced a tiny vial attached to a tube that was going into her wrist. Just a little bit of venom from Uncle Bane. Dwayla replied with a grin, both Mammoth and Beat Boy gaping towards the girl as she then whistled to herself, while making her way past them. However, with the false Beat Boy pushed the rubble from where Dwayla had smashed him into the pavement back, now in the form of a gorilla. Beat Boy and Mammoth gaped. Dwayla, he's back. Beat Boy said aloud, and the clown girl turned and raised a brow as the dark Beat Boy shook his head, a frown on his face. Wow, what does it take to put this guy under already? Dwayla wondered while scratching her head, and Beat Boy shook his head. No, seriously guys, I've tried some venom and it doesn't work, so do I need to break out the Smilex or fear toxin next? Dwayla asked while staring at the dark Beat Boy, getting disbelieving looks from the two boys as she did. However, the dark Beat Boy growled at this before unleashing a roar as it lunged at them, changing into a T-Rex along the way. Meanwhile, Cyborg was sent flying back by his own doppelganger before landing on the shore of Jump City, with a groan of pain. Pushing a giant slab off of himself, the titanium teen then turned when he heard a cry. Looking up just as his doppelganger came down on top of him with a slam, Cyborg gritted his teeth and sent him flying back. The false Cyborg landed with a smirk, while the real Cyborg narrowed his eyes onto the faker dangerously. Yo? Servo Geek. The ever-annoying voice of Gizmo came, and the doppelganger looked up to see the tiny terror as he fired off a salvo of missiles towards him. The missiles connected with the false Cyborg, sending him flying back while Gizmo landed and unleashed his spider legs from his pack. Taking in a deep breath, the tiny terror grinned while looking towards the doppelganger. Ah, the stink of battle. Working in the shop is nice and all, but I really miss slaying a herd on stupid titans. Gizmo declared, and Cyborg twitched before his doppelganger came out of the rubble and glared towards Gizmo. Alright punk, time for you to go down. The false Cyborg roared out while lunging at the tiny terror, only for him to jump into the air and bring his spider legs down at him. Gritting his teeth, the false Cyborg caught the legs only for the real one to come from the side and ram into him. Sliding to a halt beside of Gizmo, the tiny terror and titanium teen glared at one another. Me saving your ass and helping beat that thing means nothing. Gizmo stated simply while glaring at Cyborg, the titanium teen frowning towards the tiny terror in response while crossing his arms. Fine by me. Cy replied, and both turned to the side as the shadow Cy pushed some rubble off of himself with a frown. If you two pansies are done talking, let's get back to the part where I kick your butts. The false Cyborg growled out while lunging at the two, forming his sonic cannon from one arm, Cyborg doing the same and firing at the same time as he did, cancelling one another's blasts out, while Gizmo fired a ray from his pack at the false Cyborg, sending him skidding across the ground and to the side. Meanwhile, Starfire was throwing blast after blast towards her own doppelganger, while it flew round them with surprising ease. She moves like my sister. Starfire noted idly while the false Starfire came at her with starbolts formed into her hands. The false Starfire rammed into Starfire, however she pushed her back, then both slammed their energy-coated hands into each other's hands. As Starfire ducked towards the lava streams below, her doppelganger flew towards her and threw both of her starbolts, Starfire quickly dodging them before flying out of the way. As Starfire got out of the way, Blackfire came from the side with a grin, and formed a starbolt in either hand. The false Starfire raised a brow as she came and smirked while doing the same. However, Blackfire then fired her eye-beams into the shadow Starfire, sending her flying back. Don't think I'll fight fair like dear little Starfire would. Blackfire shouted at the shadow Starfire, only to see her grin down at her, and then zip towards her, catching the false Starfire as she rammed into her, Blackfire, and tried to push her into the lava below. You're most ruthless and cunning, you would be smart to join Trigon rather than Abyssin. Shadow Starfire noted aloud, and Blackfire scoffed before twisting around and grabbing the false Starfire in a sleeper hold. No thanks, tall, dark and ugly really doesn't do anything for me. Blackfire replied coolly with a cocky smirk on her lips, as she then flew down and rammed the false Starfire into one of the small islands of rock in the lava. Now you should be smart, sister dear, and give up now while you still have a chance. Blackfire then stated while crossing her arms over her chest, Starfire watching with no small amount of surprise as Blackfire was winning. Father, you were wrong to think she was ever weak. Starfire thought to herself, remembering what Blackfire had explained about her life, and how she'd only been first in line, because no one believed she'd live long enough to take it. Shaking that off, Starfire then flew down towards her sister and her doppelganger, and fired her eye-beams into the doppelganger, before landing next to her sister. Smiling brightly when there was nothing but a crater where her doppelganger had been, Starfire then wrapped her arms around her sister happily. O most beloved sister, I am most mirthful to be able to do battle with you at long last. Starfire said happily while picking Blackfire up, the older girl wincing when she noticed she was actually shorter than Starfire now. Put me down, Coriander. Blackfire ordered, and the young redhead blinked while doing so, and then winced when she noticed the height difference as well. Perhaps picking you up should be avoided in the future, yes? Starfire asked wearily, and Blackfire sighed before pinching the bridge of her nose. Whatever, just never do it again or I swear I'll. Blackfire started to say, only for both sisters to be thrown into the air, as the set doppelganger ripped its way out of the ground with a frown. Never mind that, more anger management is on the way. Blackfire declared while lunging at the doppelganger and twisted into a kick, sending it flying away before rocketing after her. My sister has far too much pent-up rage to be healthy. Starfire mumbled while watching as her sister started to slam her fists into the face Starfire's face. The dark-haired Tamaranian princess then grabbed her by one arm and twisted in the air, before throwing her up high. Forming several starbolts into her hands, Blackfire then started to throw them towards the Doppelganger, smirking as they all connected. However, she then frowned as the Doppelganger slammed into her, both gripping the other's hands in a test of strength, the false Starfire smirking darkly. You fight well for a pathetic little consecrate. Shadow Starfire taunted with a wicked grin, only for an enraged Blackfire to narrow her eyes. No one, and I mean no one, calls me that and lives. Blackfire growled out before elbowing Shadow Starfire in the face, then quickly grabbed her by her wrists and twisted around. Flying to the ground, Blackfire slammed her into a small island in the lava back first, before throwing her high up into the air. And allow me to show you what this pathetic little consecrate can really do when she's pissed off. Blackfire declared before ducking down and jumping into the air like a rocket, slamming into the Doppelganger's back before twisting her trajectory, and slammed her into the ground in the main city. Floating up from the crater she created, Blackfire crossed her arms, while the false Starfire stumbled up to her feet before shaking her head and frowning towards the severely pissed Blackfire. However, before she could attack, Starfire came at her from the side, firing her eye beams into her Doppelganger, and sending her careening into a building, which then fell on top of her. Turning to her older sister, Starfire grimaced at the twitch to her eye. Sister, do you think she is going to stay down now? Starfire questioned, only to groan as he Doppelganger slowly climbed out of the rubble and stumbled for a moment. Does that answer your question? Blackfire sniffed before cracking her knuckles with a deep scowl on her face, as her eyes started to glow purple. Sighing for a moment, Starfire then followed her sister as they both attacked her Doppelganger together. Elsewhere in the city, Kid Flash growled low in his throat as he ran alongside his own smirking Doppelganger. The two quickly turned, and then Kid Flash stopped, while his Doppelganger slid to a halt, appeasing him. You should just give up now, Bard. Save yourself the shame of getting beat by yourself. The false Kid Flash shouted at the original, only for the speedster to get down, his Doppelganger mirroring him. Lunging forward at the same time, the two speedsters rammed into one another, which only managed to send them both flying back. Skidding across the ground, Kid Flash groaned for a moment before seeing Kid Wicket appear with Billy Numerous. Oh great, did I get the bottom of the barrel or what? Kid Flash wondered aloud while his Doppelganger flipped to his feet, and Billy frowned for a moment before grinning slightly towards his clones. Boys, I got's a plan, Billy exclaimed, and one of his clones grinned. Alright, let's get to it. The clone cried and another started to rub its hands together deviously. Yeah, and then we'll finally prove our power can be useful. The teen cried while the false Kid Flash stared at both Billy Numerous and Kid Wicket for a moment before snickering to himself. Oh man, you got stuck with the losers of the group. Hell, even that one-eyed drip has a more useful power than these two dorks. Shadow Kid Flash snickered to himself while Kid looked to Billy, and both nodded their heads. Wiping a tear from his eye, Shadow Kid Flash then crouched down while looking towards the group of three. But whatever, let's see if they at least make decent speed bumps. The Doppelganger cried out while lunging forward, only for Billy to grin as he multiplied himself into a wall. Blinking for a moment, Shadow Kid Flash turned to try and get out of the way, however they turned as well. Growling, he ran as fast as he could, however Billy was able to multiply himself faster. Twitching slightly, the speedster ran and ran even as the Billies continued to block his path, before finally Kid Wicket appeared out of a portal, and slammed a fist into his face, sending him flying back. Groaning for a moment, Shadow Kid Flash then looked up only for Kid Wicket to grab him up with his cape. The Shadow 18 then reappeared in the air over the city with a smirk as he released Shadow Kid Flash and wrapped his cape back around him. Cursing loudly as he fell, the Shadow Kid Flash impacted with the ground only a short while later, Kid Flash blinking in surprise, while Billy and Kid grinned. Wow, I didn't actually think you two would be any help, but I'm glad I was proven wrong for once. Kid Flash mused only to see his dark Doppelganger pull himself out of the crater. But let's finish this. The speedster then decided as he lunged towards his Doppelganger and slammed a fist into his face, sending him skidding back along the pavement. Meanwhile, Donna grit her teeth as she rammed her Doppelganger through a building, then another before finally jumping up and ramming her into the ground. You really do need work controlling that temper. He Shadow Self commented with a smirk before kicking her off of herself. Donna flipped in the air before landing in a low crouch, grimacing slightly at a minor wound she'd sustained earlier on in the battle. Shaking her head at that, the Amazonian then lunged towards her Doppelganger only for the falser to swing her arms and connect with her instead. Grunting as she stumbled back, Donna was unable to guard when her Shadow Self then lunged forward and tackled her. Grunting as she hit the ground back first only to be used to slide down the rocky ground, Donna groaned lightly in pain when they finally came to a stop. I can't believe I actually came out of someone as pathetic as you. The false Donna noted only for a beam of green energy to slam into her from the side and knock her through a wall. Boy, do these things talk way too much, or is it just me thinking too much? Donnie suddenly wondered to herself with a frown while flying over to Donna casually. You okay, Blackie? Donnie then asked while looking down to the Amazonian, and she slowly sat up while placing a hand to her head. Yes, thank you for your assistance, sister, it is most appreciated. She replied, and Donnie raised a brow, before remembering she was an Amazon, and they called one another that. Shrugging that off, Donnie then watched as the Shadow Donna came charging towards them, and erected a barrier between them. The false Donna slammed into it only to be thrown back with a grunt, and Donnie shook her head slowly. Simple as hell to use, but oh so useful in battle. Donnie noted to herself while the false Donna narrowed her eyes onto the Gosling girl. What's the matter? Do you need the help of another to defeat me? I thought you were a warrior, not a coward. The Shadow Donna taunted, riling up the true Donna, but Donnie shook her head. It's not a coward who asks for help when she can't beat her opponent, and it's not a warrior who refuses help. The person who does that is nothing but a fool. Donnie declared with a nod of her head, and then wondered if Naruto was rubbing off on her again, before deciding not to care what of her many quirks came from her teacher role model. Growling lightly at that, the Shadow Donna narrowed her eyes before lunging towards both Donna and Donnie, the Gosling girl turning them both intangible and causing the false Donna to run straight into a wall. That is a very useful power. Donna noted while staring at Donnie, and the ghost girl grinned in response. I know, right? She said with a grin, and then turned her head as the Shadow Donna got back up and glared at her furiously. Smirking despite herself, Donnie calmly walked towards the false Donna, arms crossed over her chest, and an amused look on her face as she did. I am going to make you suffer. Shadow Donna growled out, and Donnie snorted before frowning deeply. There's absolutely nothing you can do to me that's worse than melting alive, trust me, I know. Donnie stated flatly while forming a bit of ecto energy into her right hand, the Shadow Donna scowling deeply. Then I will just break you in half and be done with it, pest. She exclaimed before roaring out as she flew towards Donnie, the Gosling girl quickly twisting on her heel and slamming a sphere of energy into her face. Meanwhile, Nightwing stood across from someone he never thought he'd have to face himself. Frowning at the cocky smirk on his dark side's face, Nightwing lunged forward, swinging his staff at him. Calm down, you really do take things way too seriously, kid. The doppelganger mocked, and a deep scowl crossed Nightwing's features as he dug the butt of his staff into the ground and used it as a lever, pulling it back, and then launching into a kick to his dark side's face. Stumbling back for a moment, his dark side then flipped onto his feet. Don't try and act like X, you're not like him, there's no gray with you, only jet black. Knight stated while narrowing his eyes onto his dark other, the false Nightwing, merely raising a brow at the comment. Oh? And here I thought Red X was your enemy. Have a change of heart since he died trying to save the girl he loved or something? Shadow Knight questioned of his original, and Nightwing merely twisted his staff around while glaring at the copy. A creature like you just wouldn't understand. Knight declared, and his copy rolled his eyes before pulling out his own staff and twisting it into his stance. You're right, I don't, and I'm so glad I don't either. Shadow Knight said darkly while lunging at his original, Nightwing blocking strike after strike from the doppelganger as it attacked him relentlessly. Seeing an opening, Knight then rolled out of the way and twisted into his sweep, however the doppelganger saw it coming and flipped out of the way before coming out in a crouch. Let's face it, Knight, we're the same guy, same moves, same tricks, even the same gadgets. Even if we do fight, it'll always come out in a deadlock. Shadow Knight noted aloud, and Nightwing narrowed his eyes onto the faker dangerously. That's where you're wrong, I have something you don't. Knight stated simply, and the Shadow Nightwing rolled his eyes. What's that then, kid, you friends? Shadow Knight asked, and Nightwing shook his head with a smirk. Not this time, it's actually a bunch of teen villains who want to live more than they hate us. Knight relied while rolling back as Jinx sent a large wave of hex energy flowing towards the Shadow Knight, knocking him back. As he went flying, Private Hive smirked and twisted around, throwing his shield into the air, but the false knight knocked it out away and landed in a roll. However, Nightwing then threw several explosive discs towards his copy, causing him to curse while ducking out of the way. However, this put him directly before a grinning Private Hive. Time for you to go, maggot. Private stated while picking up the false knight, then twisted around and threw him into the distance. Watching him fly away with no small amount of interest, Knight, Jinx, and Private then snickered upon seeing the dust cloud in the distance from his landing. Come on, let's go finish this. Knight decided while he and the others ran towards the site. As they approached, they watched as the other doppelgangers flew into the ground as well, Nightwing and Jinx looking around and smirking when they noticed none of them were actually all that tired. Looks like teaming up was a good idea, eh boy blunder. Jinx quipped, and Nightwing merely nodded his head as they approached the false titans. However, as they did, Trigon opened his eyes and frowned while looking towards the groups. Those doppelgangers are such worthless beings, bested by those children in such a short amount of time. My fire wraiths are more dangerous than them, Trigon thought with a sneer while looking towards the victorious teens with a frown. Behind him, however, a grin slipped over the Kyuubi's lips as he saw his chance at long last. Now all my hard work and planning will finally come to fruition. The Kyuubi thought to itself as it stalked closer and closer to Trigon from behind. As it did, Beat Boy felt the ground shake lightly and turned, only to whiten his eyes when he noticed that the Kyuubi was now moving around. Dudes. Beat Boy said while trying to get his friend's attention, Cyborg rolling his eyes as he turns to the green jester. What is it, Beast Boy? The Titanium Titan questioned, and Beat Boy pointed behind Trigon. As one, Tartarus, the Titans, and even their doppelgangers turned around to see Kyuubi grinning sinisterly. Before any more words could be uttered, Kyuubi's tail suddenly lashed out, wrapping around Trigon's arms, legs, waist and neck, before lifting him up into the air and away from his throne. The beast himself fully sickened at this and quickly attempted to free himself, but the Kyuubi's tails held him too firmly, and then turned him around to face the orange-furred fox. What is the meaning of this? Trigon demanded of the beast, and a grin merely crossed the Kyuubi's features, as it crouched back as if it was ready to pounce. The beast then launched itself at Trigon, knocking him to the ground as it opened his mouth with two of his free tails, his eyes widening as Kyuubi literally stuffed himself inside of the massive red demon's mouth. Sorry for not answering, but I can't speak when outside of a host, and I lose most of my ability to reason, though that is about to end. Kyuubi explained in Trigon's mind as he crawled within the massive red demon's maw and then down his throat, the Titans, Tartarus, and Justice League Unlimited looking on in shock and disgust. Oh dude. That is like so nasty. Beat Boy cried while holding his stomach, and those in both Tartarus and the Titans agreed with him. As they looked on, the Justice League Unlimited quickly rushed over to the teens while watching the spectacle as well. Frowning deeply, Batman as he watched the Kyuubi stuff itself into Trigon, the Dark Knight then looked over to Dr. Fate. Any idea what's going on? He questioned quickly, and Dr. Fate shook his head while looking at the spectacle, as Kyuubi somehow managed to shove more than half of its body inside of Trigon. Not a bloody clue. How about you, Etrigan? Dr. Fate questioned and looked to the orange-skinned demon, only to see him backing away from Trigon and Kyuubi, fear plainly written over his face. That can't be a good sign. Donna realized and then turned back to where Kyuubi was 3/4 within Trigon, only to change into a wisp of red energy, as he shoved the rest of his being within the massive red demon. Trigon stumbled and gripped at his head in pain, roaring out as he fell to his knees. What are you doing to me? Trigon demanded aloud, thrashing about as he felt an unbearable pain surge throughout his entire being, only to hear the Kyuubi's vile laughter echo within the depths of his mind. You're not but a fool, Trigon. Well, you were aware that you should never trust a demon stronger than yourself, but you forgot to take into account that I am also a fox demon. In my culture, a fox demon doesn't destroy things that would be useful to us, no, we possess them. Kyuubi cried within the mind of Trigon, his laughter echoing out within the recesses of the beast's mind as he fell to his side, screaming and roaring out in pain, as an unknown fire slowly burned his flesh away. Dude, I think the big fox thing was actually more dangerous than Trigon. Beat Boy suddenly said with wide eyes, and Nightwing twitched as they all backed away from the thrashing devil. No, you think? Jinx shouted at the green-furred teen, while a red aura formed around Trigon, one shaped like a familiar fox. Traitor. I freed you from your PR prison, and this is how you repay me. Trigon demanded loudly, only to scream as black markings formed around his eyes, a pair of tails forming from the crimson aura around his body. As that happened, his blood seemed to shift and move into the air, making the aura slowly solidify as Trigon's skin was burned away from him. Traitor. Oh really? Perhaps I am, but I'm a demon Trigon, as well as a fox. It's perfectly in my nature to use, betray, or even destroy anything I want. You chose to use my help because you were just as impatient as I, and needed my help to free yourself from your prison. Kyuubi reminded within Trigon's mind as 4 more tails of crimson energy formed from him, and the red demon gritted his teeth, while a set of enormous bones formed along Trigon's back, the skull acting as a mock helmet. Erg. I will not stand for this insult, worm. You cannot control me. I am Trigon the Terrible. The demon roared out, only to scream in pain as his flesh completely ripped off of his body. Trigon roared out in pain as it was, only for his blood to flow into the skeleton, causing his overall mass to at least double. Yet somehow his armor remained upon the arms and waist of this new being. I really think we need to get out of here. Kid Flash cried out while running to a safe distance. Shit. For once I'm with one of you snot-licking heroes. Every man for himself. The tiny terror exclaimed while activating his jetpack and flying into the distance, Jinx cursing as she had Kid Wicked pull the rest of them into a shadow before they all reformed upon the Sky Needle, yet the changing beast was still all too visible to them. Ha 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 ha. Control you. Oh, you won't have to worry about that, Trigon. When I'm done, I don't intend to leave even a shred of your being left to give me indigestion. Soon enough, both Kyuubi and Trigon will cease to exist, giving way for a new, even more powerful being to take its place. The Kyuubi exclaimed as Trigon's body started to change shape as a 9th tail formed. His hands landed on the ground and he roared out loudly, his head stretching and changing, while his 4 eyes moved towards the sides of its head, both seeming to match the skull it was wearing. What the hell is this? That Kyuubi thing wasn't even this big. Cyborg suddenly exclaimed while looking on in shocked fear, while Batman frowned deeply. Kitsune were known to possess those of great spiritual strength. Some did so to trick people, some to hide, and others did so for power. I believe this is a case of the latter happening. Batman replied while they watched the deranged being screamed out into the night, as his form was twisted more and more into something beyond demonic. I won't fade, I will endure, and I will destroy you. Trigon declared furiously, even as a pair of long ears formed from his head, as well as his antler-like crowns forming out of the skull on his head, changing into horns that curved back along his head. Endure all you like, it won't matter, because I shall restore the true power of darkness to all worlds. Go ahead and struggle, your hatred merely strengthens me, so struggle, resist, and hate me as much as you like. All it does is make it easier for me to absorb you into my being. Kyuubi declared darkly, his laughter echoing in the mind of Trigon, even as he fell into darkness. Meanwhile, a second mouth opened on the muzzle that had been formed from Trigon's body, the two mouths opening to unleash dual roars into the air, as muscle tissue began to form over the bones on Trigon's body. Whatever this thing is, it's way freaky, man. Seymour noticed while Jinx slapped the back of his head before frowning, as the shadows all around them seemed to move towards the beast. Titans, what happened to your doppelgangers? Jinx asked while looking around, and Batman frowned upon seeing the doppelgangers flying into the air, the shadow titans flying around spinning over top of the massive half-formed beast. Dude. Beat Boy exclaimed with wide eyes, only to turn as Jinx and the others in Tartarus groaned before a dark mist was pulled out of each of them as Trigon had done before. However, unlike what Trigon did, they didn't form into a doppelganger. Instead, the mist flew towards the beast, and then began to swirl above it with the Titan's doppelgangers. What now? Nightwing demanded, and Batman's eyes widened in shock. It's somehow channeling our negative energy too. He started to say, only to grit his teeth, as the same thing happened to him, Cher, and Dr. Fate, Etrigan backing away from the beast as all of the negative energy flowed into the air and swirled around its head. The beast then roared loudly, drawing the Titan's attention as it opened its lower mouth, and the negative energy spiraled downwards into its gaping maw. Shadows around the beast then literally shifted towards its body, forming into skin and fur, 10th tail forming from the body that had once been Trigon's. Dude. Beast Boy whispered in fear as the beast was completed, its head rising to roar out into the distance, while a fifth eye popped open, the 4 crimson eyes that had once been Trigon's now surrounding it. The beast was easily twice as big as Trigon while still on all fours. Its upper body reminded them of a human, only with sharp ivory claws gleaming from its paws. Deep obsidian black fur encompassing its entire body, save only for the red-orange stripes that crossed its shoulders and ribs in the same position as Trigon's own. Trigon's metal bracers and waist armor, all that remained of the former threat to all things. Its hind legs were more like those of a beast, ending with large hooves that were once Trigon's. 10 long thin tails twisted and turned from it, lashing out at the air while they did so. Finally was its head, which was a muzzle thing with 2 massive mouths. The lower mouth looked to be normal, but the upper mouth stood out, and made its head larger than average. It also had 5 horns growing back from its head at a slanted angle, giving the illusion of some kind of crown, 2 long rabbit-like ears trailing back from its head. A single massive eye is positioned at the middle of its head, right behind its upper mouth, and is bright blood red with a ripple-like pattern in it. 3 Tomo shapes along each ring surrounding the pupil, thus ending with 9 Tomo in a single eye, with 4 small blood red glowing eyes positioned around this one massive eye. No way. Cyborg whispered in shock even as he helped Mammoth and Private Hive to their feet. This is so not good. Kid Flash shouted as the beast stood on all fours, silently surveying the world around it. Hera, help us. Donna whispered as she helped Cher back to her feet along with a disorientated Batman. Forget Hera, we need all of Olympus down here. Nightwing said while looking to the massive beast, Donna blinking for a moment before nodding in agreement with her leader as the rest of Tartarus started to get up on their own. Is everyone alright, or am I the only one in pain? Jinx questioned aloud and got several pain grunts from the rest of Tartarus. Batman, you tried to say what it was doing before you passed out. Nightwing questioned, and the Dark Knight placed a hand to his head as he regained his bearings. It has absorbed our negative energy into itself, however, for what purpose it did so remains to be seen. Batman replied while he and the others walked towards the edge of the Sky Needle and looked onto the massive beast. It seemed only to stand there ominously, unmoving, its 5 red eyes remaining completely unfocused. Oh man, my head. Gizmo complained while pushing himself up, and then shook his head for a moment before turning to all of the shocked faces around him. What are you ass munchers looking at? He demanded, and they all pointed to the distance, Gizmo following their gaze, and then widening his eyes in shock upon seeing the gargantuan beast with 10 flailing tails. I don't think we're going to beat this thing even with Raven's powers. Beat Boy declared, no one looking to disagree with him, all of them watching the beast finally move slightly, stretching its neck and looking to the sky. Opening both, the beast then roared into the night loudly, its roar sending out a shockwave that rocked the earth and nearly knocked the group back. I am the Jubi no Yomi. Darkness of the 10 tails, the beast suddenly exclaimed, its deep voice echoing out over the land endlessly, before it then roared out into the night once more. Thanks for listening. I do hope you enjoyed. If you want the next part of this video, like, subscribe and comment down below, and turn on the bell notification. And also check out other videos that I have created and enjoy. See you in the next video. Peace.